Well, hello you lovelies and welcome back to my channel. Now today I have got a list of things that you really need to avoid to ensure that you just don't have those completely unnecessary mishaps on your wedding day. If you're new here guys, I'm Lauren, wedding planner and owner of Bluebird Creative and Bride Academy. I provide a weekly dose of wedding planning goodness for the modern couple as well as digital downloads. Now guys, as I get to the end of wedding season, in fact I've just come off the back of a 3 wedding weekender across our whole team, which was incredible, and we move into just 1 wedding left this year, which is going to be a corker, and I'm so excited. It's made me think about all the things that can be avoided throughout the year, some of the things that have happened, some of the things that were just completely unnecessary, and just lots of things that I've seen across the industry this year and basically across my years of wedding planning and coordinating. And I thought I would share some of them with you today so that you can avoid some of these just really easily avoidable mistakes. So without further ado, let's hop into this week's video and talk about how you can avoid these mishaps on your wedding day and what you should do to prevent them. Let's go. Okay, so things can get crazy when it comes to coordination, or just in wedding planning in general, because basically you are thrown into a full-time job that you have never done and you have no experience of, but you're expected to do it, and for some reason expected to do it with perfection, which you do not need to do. But doing it with a certain level of organisation is obviously helpful, because it will mean that as you get to your wedding day, you are going to have a smoother day and you can then relax. So let's just talk about this. I mean, I've done videos before of all the crazy things that have happened on our weddings. And as wedding planners and coordinators, we've kind of seen it all. I mean, I literally feel like I've seen it all, particularly as a coordinator, because when we're working in a planner or planning capacity, we have obviously planned the wedding from start to finish, and it's not the first time that we're doing it, and we do this as our full-time job, unlike you guys who are having to take it on top of your full-time job with no experience. Doesn't mean to say that you're not going to do a good job, but obviously we've got experience to back it, which means that when we turn up to the wedding day, firstly, we know all the ins and outs of the wedding. We've planned it, so there's less likelihood of mishaps. Things still happen on the day because you're dealing with events and you're dealing with people, but there's less likelihood of anything big happening because we've done the planning. When we're coordinating for a client, we are firefighting. We are literally firefighting because they have done the planning. Now, again, that's not to say they've done bad planning, but they're just not ready or prepped for just some of the things that happen on events. We, however, do come prepped and are very good problem solvers, and we will literally go in and firefight our way through the wedding and ensure that the couple isn't stressed, that they're not aware of any of the stuff that's happening, and that they can fully enjoy their day, which is why they bring us on. And I always advise it is good to have a wedding coordinator because you can do that. You can leave somebody else to deal with the stuff, and you can fully enjoy all those plans that you have made for your wedding day. Now, I will actually do a little linky up here as well to link the difference between a wedding coordinator and a venue coordinator. They are very different roles, guys. They are not the same. Even if the venue says that they are wedding coordinators, it's a different job to an independent wedding coordinator. So I just want to flag that. But anyway, let's get back to mishaps. Now, what can you do to avoid mishaps? Let's jump into some of these first ones. So first things first, this is going to sound obvious, but book professionals. When you are booking professionals, you have less risk of things going crazy. Now, obviously, I totally, completely appreciate that everybody has a budget, and therefore you can only book somebody within your budget. And if you don't have the budget for a certain supplier and you want something, perhaps you're going to go to a friend or a family member, or perhaps you're just not going to have that service. Perhaps you're going to do something yourself. I get it. I absolutely get it. I did my own flowers on my wedding day. I had a professional florist do our bouquets and our 2 urn arrangements for the ceremony, which I then gifted to both the mums. But I did the tablescape arrangements because of budget. So I'm with you, friends. I get it, okay? But if you can book professionals, then you are letting yourself in for less stress, because this isn't their first rodeo. They know what they're doing. They're going to be dealing with their stuff on the day. You don't have to be panicking about what's happening. Do they need somebody overseeing it, and so on. And obviously, price, experience, it all comes hand in hand. The more experience they have, the slightly more expensive they're going to be, and so on. So if you can pay for that experience and that professional, you're going to have less stress. It's a given, guys. It absolutely is. Like I say, don't take this the wrong way. I understand budget restraints. I absolutely do. But you're going to have less stress the more experienced suppliers and more professional suppliers you have. End of. So that's something to consider. Next up, when it comes to the wedding day itself, you want to make sure that you are so organised. I mean, like, so organised. Now, whether you've booked an independent wedding coordinator, whether you've got friends helping with your setup, whether you've got a venue coordinator or a catering team that are willing to take on some of the setup for you, you need to be organised. When we are working with a client, we request that everything is labelled. And I always say to my clients, idiot's guide. Treat me like an idiot, because then there is no miscommunication or just opening a box and being like, what on earth is this stuff and where do they want it? We have a very thorough process, and I ask my clients always for everything that's being placed on the tables. Where's the signage going? What do you want on this? How do you want it set up? Feel free to send me images and mock-ups if you want to. We go through it extremely thoroughly. But there is always in a coordination, random extra things in a box. Always, that I'm like, what's this for? I think recently there was a dog, there was like a cake topper, and there wasn't a cake, and then suddenly there was a cake that was in a fridge that we hadn't been told about, and we were like, okay, that's a cake topper for the cake that we didn't know about. Okay, fine, we can manage that, it's fine. There's always just random things that crop up, and it kind of makes me chuckle. But the more that it's labelled, the more that it's organised, the better your team can work for you without mishaps. So, for example, for the tables, do not, whatever you do, throw all the place names into a bag, into an envelope, and just hand them over. Whoever is setting up for you will shoot you. I would shoot you. I had this on a wedding this year, even after specifically saying that everything needs to be organised into tables. So we always say place names, menus, table names, etc. Everything for each table needs to be placed into a box for that table. Place names preferably need to be in order of how they're going around the table. It means that we can be efficient and that we're not wasting time on setup, and that we can actually be setting up efficiently, productively, and still managing everything else that needs to be happening on a wedding day as well. I got given a whole box of completely disorganised shot bottles that were place names, and let me tell you, it threw everything. It threw all the timings. There weren't enough staff on site on this particular wedding anyway, and literally the timings were off. It threw the setup by half an hour, because we literally were having to organise all these shots. It was a nightmare, an absolute nightmare for timings. So there is a reason that we ask it, and you will make everybody's life easier by doing so. So whether, if they're shot bottles, have them in boxes per table. Try and put them in order if you can do. Place in an envelope the menu cards, the table names, and so on. Anything that is for that table. If you've bought in candles, place them in the tables. If you've got little signage, anything, separate them by table. Organise the place names in order if you can do. If they're paper, it's a lot easier. That is really important. It's going to prevent mishaps. And as I said, label everything. So, idiot's guide, if there's boxes of stuff that's for the guest book table, write on the top of the box what's in it and what it's for. Don't just place stuff in it and hope for the best, unless you're super chilled and you don't care. And I doubt that you don't care. So make sure that you really are labelling everything. Absolutely everything. I mean, don't give extra additional instructions. I've had this before as well, that don't correspond to the timeline or all the other information that you've sent out, because obviously again we're looking for efficiency and productivity here. We want our supply team to be able to just go, yep, I can see what's here and I know what I need to do. So make sure it's continuing from conversations that you've had previously, but just have everything labelled so it's super obvious what's in the box and what it's for. And then remember to delegate. You know, are you having a wedding coordinator? Are you having a group of friends? Are you setting up the day before with your friends and family? However it's happening, remember to delegate, because you cannot do it on your wedding day. It's not going to happen. Please don't try and do that. You will feel stressed, you will feel flappy, flustered. You want to enjoy your wedding morning. So delegate, absolutely delegate. Whether the venue team are helping with a little bit of setup, the caterers will set up your wedding tables and so on. Delegate, delegate, delegate. Really, really important. Who is doing that? Consider that, and then make sure that they have got the information that they require. Don't assume that they know it. Let's go back to professionals, because when it comes to booking your supplier team, there's a couple of things to consider. For example, I've already mentioned about experience, and then the budget thing comes into it. But I had an experience this year that caused some massive mishaps, and basically a client had booked a chef company or a catering company that literally came with 2 chefs, and the chefs then required the client to book their own staff. This was a disaster waiting to happen, and if the client hadn't had us booked, I literally dread to think what would have happened. They only had 3 waiting staff booked for the whole event, bearing in mind that this wedding was at a very vast venue where there were pre-ceremony drinks, there was a drinks reception, wedding breakfast, drinks happening during the wedding breakfast, evening bar and so on. They were all at completely different spaces in the venue, and it was vast. And the catering staff were supposed to be managing the drinks and the food. So 3 waiting staff was the most ridiculous thing I had seen or heard of. There was no front of house manager booked, which as a coordination and planning company, it's actually in our contracts that there must be a front of house manager, because we are not managing the waiting staff. We are communicating with the front of house manager who is dealing with the waiting staff. There was no front of house manager, and there was just 3 waiting staff. This wedding needed a front of house manager and a minimum of 7 waiting staff. You've got to think about, there's people that need to be serving, they need to be clearing, somebody else is on drinks, they might be setting up the wedding breakfast whilst the drinks reception is going on. Like it didn't happen. It was carnage. It was absolute carnage. We managed to get more staff in. They managed to get a front of house manager in. Then there were staff that were sick because it was all through an agency. It was chaos, and I will definitely include this in my end of year roundup of all the things that happened this year, so make sure you keep an eye out for that. I'll link last year's one as well, because that was very funny. But it's really important that you get all the information that you need, and that if you need to seek advice with someone, then do, so that you can make sure that you have enough staff. Obviously, if you're booking a professional wedding catering company that are all service that includes staff, then you don't need to worry about that. You know, they've totally got that covered. But if you're booking, for example, a pizza company that don't provide staff, then you need to consider, how many waiting staff do I actually need? And if you need to go and seek advice on that, then do, because that could have been such a disaster, I cannot tell you. Anyway, moving on. One of the next things to do to avoid any mishaps is to make sure that you are reading your contracts. It's all well and good reading the contract at the point of signing and then leaving it, but you need to be going back through that contract and checking things. For example, sound limitations. What are the rules and regs? What restrictions does that venue have? So that when you are planning, you aren't breaching your contract or booking suppliers and them not being aware of the rules and regs, and then them turning up on the day, for example, sound limitations, and a band turning up. Maybe you've booked an 8-piece band and they have a sound limiter. That could be a really big issue, So make sure that you are communicating, you know, are there restrictions that the band have? Do they require certain things? Do they have an AV rider, which is their requirements? Does that match up with the venue's contract, and so on? Does the venue require bands to set up in a particular location? Is there space for 8 people where you want the band to be playing, and so on? That kind of thing is really, really important. So make sure you are reading those rules and regs and those contracts of all those suppliers and pulling the pieces of information together. I see it time and time again where people haven't considered that. We've had the sound limitation situation many times on coordinations where they just haven't put those pieces together and realise that it's not going to work, and then we've tried to have to manage that on the day, but it's not going to be how they'd envisaged it because they've forgotten that there's rules and regs and that there's a sound limit and that you can't have the doors open, or whatever the rules are. So definitely bear that in mind. Something else that you want to be checking in contracts is if your suppliers are they requesting food. So in our contracts, it's always in the contract that myself and my team require a hot meal during the day. You'll typically find that the band requests the same, photographers, videographers, and so on. It's typically in their contracts, so definitely just check who's required on that so you don't kind of get caught out either on the day. But also make sure that you're checking their dietaries, and then make sure that you're telling the caterers these things as well. It's really important. That sort of mishap just means that you're going to have tired, flagging suppliers, and you really want them to be on their best for you. It's a very long day. They're on their feet all day, and having a hot meal as opposed to being on site, say for us, for example, sometimes it's 8 a.m. in the morning. We might be working through till 1 a.m. If it's a coordination, it's not quite such a long day, but we're still on site for 12 hours, and we can bring our lunch with us and sandwiches. Not that we ever get time to actually eat at that point in the day, but snacks is the way to go. Having the opportunity to have a hot meal and re-energize is really important because you want your supplier team to be absolutely on their A game. Other things to be checking on those contracts and that is also access times. What time can people get on site? What time are guests allowed on site? All of those things are going to play a massive part on whether we have mishaps or not. These are just sort of like the nitty-gritty logistics, but if you haven't got a wedding planner, you need to make sure that you've got this information down so that there's not problems. Is there access for certain trucks or vehicles coming in? All these kind of like logistics, which are really not that exciting, can play a massive role in there being issues on the day, or whether you've booked the right supplier or the wrong supplier that then doesn't match up with these rules and restrictions or logistical constraints. So there we go, guys. There are a few ways to help you avoid any mishaps on your wedding day. Other things that I would suggest is just making sure that you've got your timings mapped out properly. Again, I will link another video for you which sort of goes through the timings that you don't want to forget on your wedding day. Really important just to make sure that things flow really nicely and that you're not then chasing up with time because you didn't realise that it took half an hour to get your guests seated for the wedding breakfast. So definitely consider those. Anyway, guys, I hope you found this video helpful and then it just stops you from making some accidental mistakes in your planning so that you can have a really nice smooth day on your wedding day. Don't forget, guys, we've got a free wedding planning checklist which is linked down below, as well as some of our other freebies, so please help yourself to those. They will help you with your planning and they are absolutely free. I will be back next week with some more wedding planning goodness. Until then, guys, have a great week.